All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode and allow me to introduce my guest. You may recognize her from social media where she spreads mental health awareness through her project This Is Me. And you also might recognize her from WWE where she wrestled as Kaitlyn and held the Divas Championship. Celeste Bonin, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for the intro. Thank you for having me on. It was cool when you reached out. I had my husband and I, we were on a call with our mentor, with our coach, and she was like, what do you guys want to, what else do you guys want to accomplish this year? And we're like, we want to get on more stages. We want to get on more podcasts. And then like I went and checked my email and I had a email from you about doing this podcast. And then I got another one too. So I was like, cool, like the universe is listening. So thank you so much for the intro. Thanks for having me on. And I'm super excited. So
Well, it's good to know I got you at a good time then. So
yeah, it was like, it was very aligned, like perfect timing.
Yeah. So how has 2020 or 2023? I almost said 2022. How is that? It's hard to believe. I know we're sitting here May 1st. It's hard to believe that it's been that many months already.
I
4 months in.
I know, I know. I feel like I say that every year when it comes to like like a significant season. I'm like, man, when did that happen? But truly, 2023, I feel like it was just January. I think it was literally just the new year. But man, 2023, it has seemed like a blink of an eye, but it's also been just like really transformational in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. And I think that probably will resonate with a lot of people. Because I find, in the work that I do and just being a human being, that everybody's had kind of a rough go since, a couple of years ago. 2020 really, I think, shook a lot of things up and opened a lot of people's eyes to new things, new ways of living, new perspectives, new everything, and that's true for me. And yeah, I feel like it's just been a wild ride. A lot of just personal transformation, a lot of work, self development, just a lot of getting to the root of things and really trying to find my true voice and find my true confidence and my belief in myself for what I'm doing in my life now. And 2023 is definitely the year where a lot of those seeds that I've been planting over the years and a lot of the relationships I've tried to cultivate are starting to kind of blossom now and come to fruition. I'm feeling so much of like, I'm like, well, I just want to see it. And I want to see the fruits of my labors, but I feel like patience and trust is so important right now. And
Mhm.
so that's where I'm at right now.
Did that time period of 2020 kind of accelerate what you're doing now? Do you feel because of we were obviously all isolated in the beginning. There was not a whole lot that we could do. Did that accelerate at all what you're doing now? Do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely, intrinsically. But I feel like I can't really quite put my finger on how. I just know in so many ways, my life shifted. But it's funny because, I had, when I left WWE, I started a clothing brand and I had that for 7 years. And then in 2021, in 2021, my husband and I started Project This Is Me, and I was stepping away from my clothing business, and I didn't feel in purpose, I didn't feel fulfilled, and I was just going through a lot and trying to figure out a lot of things, and so we look at it as kind of like we built this vessel for our own healing, our own transformation, our own work, and in order to be able to do what we do. So yes, but it's funny, like it didn't change our lifestyle or anything because we were both working from home. My husband has been a coach, a mentor, in a lot of capacities for the past like 8 or 10 years, and I was running my business from our home too, and I had a warehouse downtown. But so when COVID hit and things, a lot of people were working from home and stuff, we weren't really affected. We were working from home anyways, but we started to change a lot of the ways that we were going about what we were doing. We started learning a lot more about biohacking and learning how to just get more present into our bodies and just learning different ways to heal ourselves, be more productive, to have a better mental attitude, just working ourselves from the inside out essentially. So it didn't affect our schedule, but it really did affect everything that we were doing because we were like, let's change it up. Let's start to do things different. And through every step of our own process and our own growth and our own transformation, we were, bringing our clients and our people along with us on the ride. And something really beautiful that I've noticed when you're in the work of self-development, guiding people or coaching people, you attract clients that are going through the same things as you. So
Right.
when you're doing the work, when you're really putting in the work, we have a coach and mentor that we work with, and she's helped us break through so many things, and we work with each other too. And but when you're actually doing the work and you're focusing on the things that are coming up in your life that need resolution or healing or work or attention, when you start doing that work, you start to really be able to help your clients and really to attract clients that are needing exactly what you're doing in your own medicine, and the ways that you're going about healing your life. But it was really challenging for me, believing in myself, really switching careers from what I was doing for 7 years in entrepreneurship, and I'm still an entrepreneur, but with a physical product like clothing. I was designing all the pieces myself and going through the production and the shipping, and it was so much, but I learned an incredible amount. But I struggled a lot in terms of believing in myself that I could really help people on a deep level, and in that capacity, especially with not having like a degree. And a lot of people look at what we do as, oh, is it like therapy? Is it like this? Is it like this? And because as human beings, the way the mind works, we're always trying to be able to have something make more sense to us. And so it's taken quite a bit of time and really learning our craft to be able to share more openly and candidly what we do. And it's so much about the energetics and the embodiment of the way you choose to live your life, and just being able to see different perspectives rather than being stuck in the same thought loops, the same patterns, the same reoccurring
Mhm.
problems in your life.
I think the great thing about what you're doing is, although you're a coach, you're already finding out things about yourself in that process along with the people that you're coaching, rather than like, the traditional coach where they kind of have all the answers already and like they're more so teaching it to people. You're finding this information about yourself with your clients at the same time. So it makes the ride
Yes.
all the more fulfilling and interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's cool because the a lot of the pride that I take and the love that I have for what we do, what I do, is the commitment to the mastery of yourself. And there's so many different things to say about self development, but and there's so many different like hypotheses and like scientific methods and so many different things. But really, when you study yourself, you're studying the true subject. You're studying the true knowledge. So the deeper that you go within yourself, the more that you can help others. And really, the way that we explain to a lot of people is like all the things that we've experienced and found methods and practices and different ways of looking at things that have helped us has helped us create ease in our life, and create the lifestyle that we want and the lifestyle that we love, which is actually what we do for people. So we don't have people come to us and say, here's how you make your life exactly like ours. We say, hey, like, what is it within you that makes you feel alive? What is it within you that makes you feel inspired? And we help people really bring that to the surface. And then we teach people tools to be able to combat triggers and cycles and elevated states where you can't actually access your true genius, where you can't actually access your true thoughts, your heart, your true voice. So the more that we become embodied, the more that we practice what we teach, the more of an expert that we become essentially in living the life that you want to live. And so it's very, very fulfilling. And the more that we commit to ourselves, the more that we commit to our clients, and then just the more, I guess, love there is out there in the world, and joy, really. Because something that I found so profound is that the more time I spend doing things that I love, that really inspire me and bring me joy, the more time I can actually stay in the states that feel good, like in joy, in happiness, in appreciation and gratitude, because my body has started to learn that it's okay to feel those things for a long period of time, rather than feeling something really exciting and really joyful for a little bit, and then having all those thoughts come in,
Mhm.
maybe negative intrusive thoughts that take you out of a good feeling state, and then you get stuck in kind of the the heavier frequencies, the heavier energies that don't allow you to um, say what you want to say. They don't allow you to connect with people really authentically. They don't allow you to be the magic that you are in the world.
Hmm. Did you always have it like in your line of view when you were growing up that like one day I want to be helping other people? Or did that just organically happen with your own life experiences to where you wanted to take that step?
That's an amazing question. That's a really cool question. I think that when I was younger, I always had this idea of myself that I'm like, I'm going to do something really epic with my life. And I didn't really know what that was. It was just more of like, I just had this feeling. But and as far as like knowing that I was going to help people, I think that we all have that desire within us, like that it feels good when you help someone. It feels good when you can share something within you that can help the quality of someone's experience and just help the quality of someone's life, or even if it's just for like that day, helping them
Hmm.
feel more hope or just more, more happiness. But I didn't recognize this in myself until, quite recently over the past couple of years when I look back in retrospect. But I really have always had a gift and a love for connecting with people, helping people feel seen. Really connecting with people that maybe that don't allow themselves to feel seen or be seen by a lot of people, or they don't necessarily feel safe in general to be themselves. And I think one of my special gifts is that I feel like that I've always known how that feels. And I think that's kind of funny to say that sitting here in this seat, like I speak publicly all the time. I've been on TV. I've done all this stuff in front of huge crowds of people. But in my own experience, in the way that I have gone to the world, I have felt very unseen and very unacknowledged and unrecognized for the things within me that I truly value, that I've never really known how to get out to the world. And so in moments where I'm able to see that struggle or that pain in another person, it has helped me like connect to them in the moment and help them feel seen, because that's all I've ever wanted in my life. And so I think that being able to, doing what we do now, being able to really harness that gift of really being able to see someone and meet them where they're at, and really like look them in the eyes and be like, yo, you're dope. Like I see you, I feel you, I get it. I understand what it feels like to feel trapped or feel unseen, or just not know how to feel safe to be seen for who you are. And so I think that's like a magnificent question, because I've never really broken it down like that, but that truly is how I feel and how I've always felt about myself. And I struggled for a long time to say like I'm really good at this, or this is my best quality. But I can say, with so much confidence now, that one of my absolute best qualities is, and I think is part of my gift, is to be able just to meet someone where they're at, and say, have that like intimate conversation and intimate connection, and be able to create that space with somebody.
Hmm. And what you're doing is important too, also, because I think when, normal people are just watching people they see on TV, they often assume like they have like this coat of armor, right? Where nothing can affect you. But we've taken like such a step in society now to where more people that are on TV are using their platforms and their voice, such as yourself, to kind of talk about real experiences and real emotions. So,
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, and it's, at first I started realizing this a lot in with other wrestlers, um, you know, my idea before I even got the opportunity to, go and be a part of the WWE, just like anybody would, I had these ideas of what it was going to be like, and just, from the outside looking, and be like, this is what it's going to be like. And then getting there and experiencing like, all the self-doubt and all the struggles that I had, and then also being able to see that, in the locker room and back behind stage, like just how, and everybody that is on television, wrestling in the ring, they're also a human being, and they have deep insecurities and they have deep fears, and so being able to be around that and see, first of all, so many people like overcome that in so many ways daily, going out and stepping out in front of the ring, or in the ring in front of the crowd, but just to know what truly goes on and what truly transpires backstage, like how nervous you get, and just like judging, am I good enough? Am I going to be able to put on a good enough show? Am I going to be able to have the title one day, just, all those thoughts that run through your head. I know for a long time I could never watch my own matches back. Like I just, I would judge myself so much. And, the way that I started wrestling, the first couple of matches I ever had were on live TV, on NXT when that was still an elimination show. So I had so many insecurities about my ability and like, am I good enough to be here? And am I good enough to speak my true voice and all those things? And I had so many insecurities when I was wrestling, so many. But I've wrestled in the Staples Center in front of 5,000 people, wrestled in Madison Square Garden. I've done pay-per-views, and it's thousands of people and millions at home watching. But it's different. It was just different to me then. But I was always kind of in like a fear mode. I was always like so afraid of messing up, and there were certainly moments where I was in the ring where I was very in the moment, and those were some of my best matches and best segments. But a lot of the time I spent so much time in my head just overthinking everything, worrying about the next spot, worrying about getting injured, worrying about looking okay, how do I look on TV? And I struggled with my weight, and so I spent so much time in my head that but anytime that I can share that with somebody who maybe knows me from wrestling or knows me from a different aspect, I love sharing that because I feel like it gives such perspective, and it's so real. Because we all create characters about somebody that we don't necessarily know their life, but we can recognize a quality that we love about them, and especially when I have like younger women come up to me and they maybe watched me 10 years ago when they were like 14, and now they're in their 20s, and they can share like some of the lessons and the things that they gained from watching the Divas in my era. It makes me feel so proud and so fulfilled. And then on top of that, being able to say, here, just so you know, like I was struggling with all the things that you're struggling with right now, and it's so normal, and here's actually some ways to get around it, or some ways to make it not as hard in moments.
Yeah, and I've also heard you talk in other interviews kind of about the tail end of your WWE run weighing on you emotionally. Would you say that was the genesis for kind of the path that you're on now? And maybe what about that last tail end of your run dawned upon you that I'm going through some real stuff here?
Great word, genesis. I love that word.
I know.
Yeah, I think it's so good. But yeah, I think it was certainly, I can look back now and be like, yeah, that was a huge part. But when I was going through that, I got signed when I was 23, and I was just like anybody else. I had certain experiences that shaped me, and certain things that were really traumatic growing up, and that, really had an effect on me. And I had never really like understood any of those things, processed any of those things. I was still really young. And then getting the opportunity to do something as amazing as getting to wrestle for WWE, especially in the way that I got signed and debuted and stuff, it was essentially, I feel like I kind of really didn't have time to think about anything. I was just like, okay, I have nothing to lose. This is what I signed up for. But as it was a very difficult life, to be on the road so much. And then I was just in my head so much, and I didn't really have a lot of relational skills as far as relating to the other women in the locker room. So I struggled there. And, there were some women that I really connected with, but it was when I really got my feet wet, and I had that title run with Eve, and she took me under her wing, and she taught me so much, and we had just such an amazing time together, to getting the title, and then my whole storyline with AJ, and then us building up to all the cool amazing segments we did, and then having that really amazing pay-per-view where he won the title from me. And then it was like a really cool stint of time. It was the hardest time of my life up until then, because I was getting all these opportunities, but I was feeling so down on myself. I had started to, at that point I was on the road for a couple years already, and I had started to like not really understand the right way to take care of my body, as far as like what's overdoing it. Like I think there was a time in NXT when NXT was kind of becoming like a regular episodic show, and it was coming out of like the seasons where it was the elimination show. Yeah, it was like in this weird stage. I had gone on this crazy bodybuilding diet. I used to do fitness and stuff before, fitness competitions before I started wrestling. But so I had this idea, you know, like if I'm in better shape, I'll get more TV time. I'll get, you know, storylines, and I'll be more relevant and prevalent. And, so I lost like 20 pounds. I got like super ripped. I did this like really like a low calorie deficit, bodybuilding diet, and was just it was so much output. I was doing like crazy amounts of cardio, and I was traveling, and just like, you know, I felt like I had so much cortisol and stress in my body all the time that my body really started to not respond to what I was doing. I started gaining a lot of weight. I felt like my hormones were really off. And I was really depressed. So it was physically, emotionally, you know, spiritually, mentally. I felt very confused. I felt like in a lot of pain, and I had no clarity for my life. When I started to visibly gain weight, I really let it get to me, and I just felt so worthless. And so I was kind of like creating more of those feelings for myself, not really knowing that I was doing it. I was just like in such a heavy emotional state that I really couldn't see above the cloud. You know, it was like this dark cloud. And I remember, so I debuted on NXT season 3 in Baltimore. It was the first time I debuted on television was Baltimore. And then it was 4 years later in January. It was like 6 months after I'd lost the title to AJ, and our storyline kind of had dwindled, and Total Divas had started. And I wasn't a part of that. And so I just felt kind of just like so worthless. And I was like, I don't feel like I fit anywhere. I'm probably going to get fired. And so the WWE office had hired somebody new that was like overseeing travel and talent, and leading up until this date that I'm talking about, we would get our travel every week. So I would get my ticket, I would get my travel, and I'm like, okay, my plane leaves, and I was living at Tampa at the time. My plane leaves Tampa at this time. I'm going to this city, and then, you know, I'd figure out my travel. So I was still going to TVs. I wasn't booked a lot. And then all of a sudden, 1 week, I didn't get my travel. And so I reached out to one of the writers, and he was like, let me see, let me figure it out. And he came back, and he's like, you know, they're trying to not bring talent that's not booked. And before, everybody went to TV. And if they needed you, you were there, boom, you're on TV. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the beginning of the end. I'm probably gonna get fired. And I was like really panicking about it. And they ended up actually bringing me out to TV anyways, because I was just like, what is happening, you know? And I wanted to be able to talk to them in person. And so I was in South Florida at the time. I lived in Tampa for a long time, and then like the last year that I was with the company, they let me move back home to Houston. But I was going between Houston and Boca, because I had gotten engaged at that time to my ex-husband, and so I was like kind of going back and forth there. And so I was flying. They booked me a ticket the day of Raw. It was in Baltimore from Boca, and it took me. It was in January, so Baltimore was having like a snowstorm, and it was like the worst travel ever. Like I went from Fort Lauderdale Airport to connecting somewhere. We were stuck on the runway for like 4 hours. The plane was frozen. Finally get to Baltimore. It was just like so many issues. Every road bump you could have with a travel day I had. And I got there, and I was like so defeated. I was already feeling really down on myself, and I wasn't booked at all. There was like nothing. And then you know, the show was already written, and but by the time I got there, it was really close to the show starting. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I looked around, and I was like, oh my God, this is Baltimore. This is where I debuted. And I was like, it's a sign. You know, this is a sign. This is it for me. And I think I was running. I just had so much fear that I was going to get let go, and I was going to be really embarrassed. And I just was being so hard on myself that I went into talent relations, talked to Mark Carano, and I was like, I think I'm going to ask, I want to ask for my release. And you know, they just told me to sleep on it. And then I came back the next day. I think TV was in Philly, and my stomach was in such a knot. Like I felt so sick to my stomach. I was like, I just didn't know if I was making the right decision. I didn't know what I was going to do the rest of my life, but I was just like, I wanted to like give myself the ability to leave on my own terms. And when I left, I already had some ideas of wanting to start my clothing business, but I was just running. I was really just running from all of these problems that were just kind of chasing me, that I didn't realize that they were just within me, and I was just bringing them with me through everything I was trying to do. And I was just running from looking at the problems and looking at that. So, it was another 5 years before I even, maybe it wasn't, no, it was maybe another like 3 years before I really realized that I needed to look at my life and look at my problems, because I was creating the same problems, the same, really bad relationships. I was creating just the same issues over and over, the same painful things in my life. And I realized that like I was the source of them. I was the problem. And then I started to really kind of awaken to myself, or I was like struggling with, so I had a really bad divorce, and then I struggled really bad with alcohol and drugs. And that was really the lowest point. That was 5 years ago. That was in 2018. And that to me was the indication that I was just like, I need to stop running. I need to stop trying to disassociate. I need to stop escaping my problems and just deal with them. I just didn't feel like I knew how, and I didn't feel like I had the tools or that I was capable to do that.
Right. And you don't really get time to think about how you might handle those situations because someone in your shoes, let's just say, right? Because that schedule is so like rigorous to where you're feeling these emotions, but all you know is, okay, I've got to be at this hotel at this time, have to hit the gym while I'm there, and then I'm just going straight to the event. And it's rinse and repeat, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And there were like, don't get me wrong though, I did so many amazing things. I saw so many unbelievable cities, so so many countries, traveled the world, did so many awesome things on television, met so many amazing people. But I felt like I truly couldn't enjoy all of it for what it was, because I was in that mode. I was just like surviving, just get to this, be enough for this. Like, let me just get through this. And I was really beating my body up a lot, like not really knowing how to take care of it with, diet and care for myself. But I also was not really allowing my body to recover from like certain things that happened in the ring, or just injuries, or just stuff that, like, I had a rib that was out for like 5 months. And it was
Wow.
like so painful, but I never got it checked out, because I was just like, I don't know, my body just hurts. I'm, slamming my body down on this mat week after week. And I had really just disassociated from so much pain and so many problems I was having. And so, yeah, that's all that pain really started to come to the surface and be so activated in that time after my divorce. And when I was like drinking a lot, because I was really trying to numb all the things that I was feeling. And it was just like, really ready for me to start addressing and start looking at. And so in terms of your question, but that, I think that what happened at the end of my career, how things fell for me, was absolutely the first part of realizing like, hey, I need to change, but I couldn't really, I wasn't able to really like harness that and grasp that until a few years later in 2018, when I was like, man, something's got to change.
Hmm. Like when you hear somebody say the words WWE to you or bring up moments of WWE, do you get triggered from it, or are you able to kind of separate the entities of like, okay, I did something cool and positive during my time there versus, thoughts and ideas of things that were occurring in your personal life with your emotions happening during that time period?
Yeah.
Like, are you able to differentiate the two?
That's an amazing question. I think I always appreciated anybody that would come up and be like, "Oh, I recognize you from wrestling. I recognize you from WWE." I mean, there's always I love the world of wrestling and how loyal and loving the fans are. I mean, sometimes fans can be really mean, but for the most part, I feel like it's such a there's people are so fans that I've had fans for 10 years, that, and I haven't wrestled in so long. So I really love and value and appreciate that culture of wrestling fans, and just with the art of it, and how connected they are to it. So anytime I would get anybody that would recognize me or would come up to me and share like, oh, I was a fan from the start of NXT all the way through your title run or whatever, I would always be like super grateful, but I never really allowed myself to fully receive the compliment, because like you're saying, like I always had those thoughts about myself. I had thoughts about like, man, I never really amounted to what I knew that I could do. I never, left the legacy that I wanted to leave, or all these things. My mind would focus on the negatives, and my mind would focus on the times that I was like really embarrassed on TV because I messed up, I didn't know how to wrestle, or at times that I felt embarrassed on TV, especially during NXT. I just had no idea what anything was. But I've always really appreciated people being able to recognize me. And then my husband, he would always like notice these interactions, and he'd be like, that's so cool. Like that man or that woman came up to you and said that to you. He's like, do you realize like how many lives that you touched through like what you've done. And I wouldn't be able to like take the compliment. I wouldn't be able to truly feel it. And then he would say things like, you know, I know that you wished your career would have maybe been a little bit different, or you're so hard on yourself, but he's like, you are the person that did all those things. Because I would always
Mhm.
give the credit to, like, I would always be like, always in the right place at the right time. I just happened to get so lucky, you know, and which is true. I had so many fortunate, amazing circumstances that helped me get to the next level of my career in terms of wrestling, and just even how I started my career. And so I always gave the credit away to that. And slowly I started to realize, like, man, I am the person that chose to take on these really intimidating things, these really like courageous things. And I started to be able to recognize myself more and more for what I chose to do and how I endured it, even though it was such a struggle for me. And it really allowed me to let go of a lot of like the negative thoughts I had about myself when I was wrestling. And it allows me to acknowledge how much of an impact I had in certain people's lives, more so younger women. And I have it reflected to me a lot now when I do certain wrestling signings, or I just run into somebody. Like, I've gotten to have a couple matches, you know, after leaving WWE with women who looked up to me, watched me on TV, and they were like, I want to wrestle. And it's happened like 3 or 4 times where I've come into contact, whether I'm at a signing and they're like right next to me with the same promoter, and they're like a young up and coming wrestler or something, and they're like, I used to watch you in, you know, 20 whatever year, 2013 when you had the title and stuff. And I'm like, and they're like this impressive wrestler now, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so insane to think about, like the impact on certain people. And that in those moments, it truly allows me to like open more to what an amazing part of my life that was. And I always say, though, you know, I know we're talking about a lot of the negative things, and the negative thoughts I had about myself during that time, but I always say to everybody, anytime that I get the opportunity to talk about wrestling with somebody in a deep way, I always talk about that, my love for wrestling and my love for the way that it shaped and refined me in that part of my life, and all the things that it taught me. And it really did show me who I was. Like, there were so many times that I would, like, you know, my brother and I are really tight, that I would like text my brother and I'd be like, I don't fucking get it, I want to quit, like, you know, and just not understanding how to step into myself, not understanding how to like have more confidence in myself. And I remember there were so many times that I wanted to quit, but you know, and I eventually did. I eventually left, but there were so many cool things that I did, and there's so many things that I am proud of, especially now looking back. And I'm like, man, that was so cool. You know, like just certain matches, like, you know, certain pay-per-views, and just decisions that I made in the ring, or decisions that I made with someone in the ring, that were like make or break decisions, really under pressure, where we nailed it. You know, just like so many cool moments, and getting like certain segments on Raw or certain segments on pay-per-views and stuff that were just huge accomplishments that I could never really recognize in the moment. And now I'm like, man, it was so cool. It was so cool that I got to do that stuff.
Hmm. And I want to take you back a little bit, because you did mention about being a bodybuilder prior to joining the WWE. Where was like your head at in terms of where you wanted to be? Like, you were obviously bodybuilding, but was that with the specific intent to get noticed by WWE, or how did that process go?
No, you're a great podcast host. You have great questions. No, so I started training, weight training when I was like 14. I really I loved the way muscular women look. I just like loved muscles. I felt like and I felt like it was kind of my identity to be like the strong, muscular chick, you know. And I found so much strength in that, and so much like kind of belonging in weight training. I had a track coach in high school who, she used to do fitness competitions, and I would look at the first time I ever saw any woman in person, and this is over 20 years ago. You know, this is before Instagram. This is before this, you know, everybody was into fitness or fitness competitions. And so I had never really seen a woman that looked like her. You know, my mom was always in incredible shape. She was always an athlete. And I got great genetics from my parents, but I'd never seen anyone that looked like her. And I was like, holy shit, you know, and I was like so infatuated with her commitment to her body. And I was going through just struggles at home. And so she really like took me under her wing and started teaching me a lot of fundamentals of weight training. And she would even trained me after school at like a Gold's Gym, and she was someone who was like just had a huge impact in my life. And then when I started, getting more comfortable with that, I would do the football camps every year in high school with all the guys. I was like the only girl, and it was like an hour of weight training, an hour of like
Like
running and
equipment
drills
football?
and stuff.
Like
What's
with the
that?
equip, like actual football, like
No,
with
I
the
wouldn't do the
equipment.
equipment, but it was like the summer. It was like the summer training session before the season.
Okay.
So they would have all
Oh,
the guys start coming out like in July, and it was like a 6 week camp or whatever, just to kind of get your conditioning and stuff. So I started doing that, and I was just really into it. And then, so when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something. I was, something like kinesiology or physical therapy or something physical with the body. And then I just was kind of going into community college, not really having much direction. And then I got, when it was like my first year out of high school, I found like a local fitness competition, and I just started looking online at all these different physiques, and I was like, I want to do this. And so I did my very first figure competition like right when I turned 19, and I had a lot of success. And I like won my class, and I did some bigger competitions, and I loved it, but I was still searching. I was just searching for a purpose. I was searching for a feeling of finding my thing, I was searching for a feeling essentially, and so I had done a couple of competitions for a few years, and then I kind of started to struggle with like some disordered eating and some just not really understanding nutrition that well, or not really understanding my body that much. And I started to have too much muscle for like figure competition. So I was advised to, you should do women's bodybuilding. And I was like, okay, it wasn't really anything I don't think I really was like, oh, I can't wait to do women's bodybuilding. I just didn't know where I fit. I was like, okay, let me train for this. And then during that time when I was starting to train for my first bodybuilding show, and I was also like a natural athlete. I wasn't interested in any like drugs,
yeah.
steroids or anything like that. So I was just like, well, I don't know, let me try it. And then I had that opportunity to try out for WWE. So it just went from this pursuit in fitness to then having this like bigger opportunity with wrestling. And I felt like wrestling was like fitness competitions, but way more dynamic and way more amazing, because with fitness I would still get on stage after X amount of months of really hard work and present my physique and all that, but it just never was super fulfilling for me, and I don't think it ever would have been if I won every single show I ever did, because I was looking for a certain feeling that couldn't give me.
Hmm.
And so I felt that wrestling was so much more up my alley. It was like just so much more, I could use my voice, I could use my athleticism, I could, I was like, now this is something I feel like I could really do. But still with wrestling, it still turned into like I was looking to achieve something. I was looking to achieve status and hoping that climb my way up, get the title, become women's champion, get on TV, do all these things, and that I was hoping that would give me that feeling that I was searching for. So it just kind of went from fitness to wrestling. I was just trying to fill this void. I really just wanted to have this what it
Feeling
comes
of
down to is
recognition.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the deepest level was love for myself,
Mm.
but I was looking to fill that through accomplishments and achievements.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember during that time period of which you were in that era where it was kind of taking a little bit of a shift into the more reality type genre, I would feel. Like that era, like the Divas era. And I remember you and AJ really broke that mold of like, because I think at the time period, a lot of the matches were shorter and there wasn't like a ton of meticulous storytelling. But what you and AJ were able to do during that time period, I remember just loving it so much. Like the acting job that both of you did was phenomenal. Like you had like tears coming down your face during several segments. Like it was
Yeah,
so good. Is that
thank
what you would
you.
consider the proudest moment of your career?
Yeah, I thank you so much for that. Yeah, so it was a really interesting time. It was a really interesting time. Like I remember when AJ got, and I ended up winning NXT, so I was up on the road, but just not really doing much for a while. And then AJ was up there, Naomi came up, Oksana came up, all the girls that were in NXT with me started to come up, and it was cool. And what we were noticing is that the locker room wasn't the greatest. It just wasn't. And we had certain veterans, like Beth, who was always incredible, Eve, always incredible, Natty, she's been wonderful. But we decided, we never really talked about it. Maybe a few times we did between each other, but we decided that we really wanted to create a different culture in the locker room. And we did that. Because we saw that there were so many talented women down in developmental that we had the opportunity to work with and in certain capacities that were going to be coming up on the road. So we decided to really empower them, because it was this shift in perspective where we all kind of saw that when one of us does great, it's a capacity for all of us to do great, instead of if one of us does great, nobody can do great, which was kind of the attitude that was there when we started to come up on the road from developmental. And so during that time, we were starting to take more risks, get more push for better storylines, like taking the liberty to write our own pitch things and just take risks. And we had certain writers that were really key in that, and just we had certain people, the right people that kind of believed in us, and we started to believe in ourselves, that we can really get more TV time, we can become more relevant, we can actually display the talent that we do have. And AJ, she taught me so much. I remember when I first found out that I was going to debut on NXT season 3. I found out 3 days beforehand, because down at FCW, before it was a performance center, it was Florida Championship Wrestling down in Tampa. There was only 8 girls when I arrived, and so 6 of the girls were already, or 5 of them were already going to be. I think there were 7 of us. It was me and one other girl, and then the 5 girls that were going to be on NXT. And then they brought in Lindsay Hayward, who was a really tall 6'8" girl. She was going to be the draw for the season. And then 4 days before the show debuted, they let her go. There was just a disagreement with some of the content she had out on the internet. It didn't vibe with what WWE was trying to do with their PG stuff. And so they were like, they pulled me up to go on the show. And so yeah, I forgot where I was going with this, but so I don't even remember why I started saying that, but essentially the way that I think I was talking about maybe the way that I debuted versus
you were.
I don't remember. But so essentially just the whole idea of it is we really saw this opportunity to start doing more cool stuff. Oh, that's what I was going to say with AJ. When I found out that I was going to be going on the road with him, her and I had already made a friendship over, the first couple of days I was there, we really bonded. And I called her and I was so upset. I was crying. It wasn't I wasn't upset in a bad way. I was just so nervous and so anxious and not really thinking. I was I don't know if I can do this. And she was so amazing from day one. She was congrats, you got this, and we helped each other through so many difficult moments. We traveled together for a long time. She taught me so much, and our friendship, the friendship we had cultivated throughout the entire thing, was really what pulled us through in those moments where we were oh my gosh, this is a big deal. Can we do this? There's a lot riding on this moment. And so I think the chemistry and the trust that we had cultivated over our friendship had so much to do with that. There was so much trust involved, and just ego out the door. Leaving your ego at the door and saying, okay, how can we show the best possible version of each other, to the world? And we committed to that in the best way that we could, while navigating all the external things, the time implications, you can do this, but you can't do this. Don't do this move. Don't do this move. There's certain things and the risks that we took in certain moments where we're I don't know if we should do this, but we did it. So yeah, it was a lot of those moments that really defined my career as far as what it means to me, and looking back at how far we came. And it was a really strange time because they had, when Total Divas launched, everyone was excited because it was this extra ability to look at women's wrestling from a non-wrestler's perspective, from a regular outside, maybe people that don't know about professional wrestling, they can now watch this show and have an insight into what the life is what it really is. And when it first debuted, Vince told us, this is a totally separate thing. It's not going to affect any storylines. And then it started affecting all the storylines. And it was really interesting. And it was very hard to understand for all of us because we were like, well, on social media, we know we're our character. You know, we all had our TV names as our social media handles and stuff. So it was kind of hard to understand how to show up. And then when the reality aspect started coming in, it was like another layer. And then they started having people be more themselves on social media, and it was like some people were and some people weren't. So it was just like a super weird time, a super transitional time. But looking from that point to now, I love where it's at now. I love being able to, like, Becky Lynch or whoever. I love being able to see them on TV, and then the way that they portray themselves through such an art on social media. Like, it's so real, but it's also essence of their character too. And so I think that is such an art that has been developed over time, and it really is so different when you look at it now to that time period. It's so crazy. It's so different.
Yeah, we've seen it kind of take shape like progressively over time. And I was kind of like seeing the art on screen between you and AJ. You could kind of really see like your real life relationship with each other and how much chemistry you guys had on screen kind of shine through. And I kind of almost feel like your guys' real life relationship behind the scenes kind of helped elevate the on-screen product in which we got the whole secret admirer storyline. Like, you guys were so like comfortable with each other to like
Yeah.
act at that moment. Did one of you two
Yeah.
pitch that? Did one of you two pitch that storyline, or was that kind of presented to you with the whole secret admirer?
I actually don't remember that. I don't remember if that was one of our ideas, because it was like the whole storyline, the whole thing was laced with all these like silly little ideas that we would try, and we would try to get, believe in the segment or get added to the segment. But we did. It's cool to know that like that was that transpired through what we were doing, because we did. We had so much fun, and then we started to have. I have like a really close friendship with Etor, Big E,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was in that. He was involved in that whole thing, and so it was like a really cool time because. So I think AJ, myself, and E, we were all kind of just going through our own thing, our own internal personal struggles, but like we had like such a dope thing together, and so it was fun. It was like where we were deciding to take creative risks by pitching certain ideas, pitching things, and then also those things that felt like risks were actually more fun on screen, or especially when it was something live, because you really had real time, you really had to have each other's back in that moment, and you just can't do that unless you have a solidified foundation of trust, like, no matter what, I got you. And that's crazy to me that it doesn't exist more, because it's so insane to me, and this happened to me a couple times, but there were just certain women that I just didn't have chemistry with, which is fine. But it's when you don't have trust with somebody, it's so difficult to trust them in the ring with your body. It's like your job is to take care of them, and their job is to take care of you, and then that's the first job, and then the second job is to tell a story and entertain. And when you don't have that trust or that connection with somebody, or you're unwilling to open to that type of relationship, even if it's just in the ring, even if it's a strictly professional and you're not best friends, that's fine. That's most people. But it always really blew my mind that there was such a lack of trust between certain individuals. And I think that most of that came from a scarcity mindset of being afraid that if you were going to open up and trust that this person's going to take care of you, make sure you shine, and then that you're going to take care of this person and make sure they shine, like, it's vulnerable. And most of us were so worried about losing our spots, or like getting fired, or not being prevalent, or not being booked on the next show. So it really creates this like, individual mindset where you're just watching out for yourself, where you're just trying to get all your shit in, where you're just trying to make sure you look good, because you're afraid that if you don't, you might get released, or no one's going to care about you, when in reality, when you show up willing to put the other person over, willing to make the other person look good, like, you understand that all of that works together in cultivating an overall culture, like in wrestling, in the quality of the promos, in the quality of the television. But it is just hard to make that investment and that commitment before you see it. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
trust that. And so I understand that, and I recognize that. because that was me too. Aside from a few people, I wasn't necessarily like, oh, I gotta watch my back, but I was in fear and scarcity mindset a lot of the time. So I think that I could have probably had, a lot of um, the quality of my matches may have been so different if I had the ability to just like trust more. But I just wasn't at that point in my life yet. Now I can look back and be like, wow, that like such a huge lesson and transformation in the way that I look at the world. But then I wasn't able to see that.
And I just look at like almost like we just missed the mark with getting like some of the current women with you and AJ in the ring. Like they just came up with like the women's revolution in 2015, I want to say, and then you and AJ had your story going on in 2013. So we were this close to getting like you guys as a part of like the women's revolution. And I think about all the possible matchups that you and her could have had with some of the women that are currently doing it.
Same. Yeah. There's.
Yeah. Do you ever think about that?
I do. I'm, and I get that question a lot, actually. Like, out of the roster now, all of the talented women, like, who would you have really wanted to work with? And, I mean, all of them, they're all so good. They're all like such risk takers. They're all so courageous. They're all such like, artists. And I really respect it so much. And yeah, it's interesting but I think that all of it, from the beginning of women's wrestling, but really from like the late cool time era to when we were there, and then to it all was momentum. It was just all momentum to be able to get to the really big women's evolution, and to start seeing some of the spectacular wrestling that was happening between the women. But I think it all had to build together. It was all big, long process, and none of it could have happened without any other, small piece and any little hiccup in the process. But yeah, it's funny, like, to think about, getting to wrestle. It would have been so cool to get to wrestle, Charlotte or Becky or Sasha, because I have, so much respect for them in their craft and what they do.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever like against the whole idea of the WWE women's title being referenced as a Divas title? Because I know a lot of women who have been voiced and happy that they ultimately changed it to Women's Championship and got rid of the whole Divas label. Was that something that you ever thought about, or were you just kind of happy to be in the position you were?
I never resonated with the word diva. Like I just never, I felt like it never really represented me. And I still don't, but so I think that changing it to the women's championship was such a great move. It was so cool, such a cool move, because I just think it just changed it. It put it into a more elevated category, in my opinion. So, and it just holds a different prestige to me. And that's just how I looked at it. And mostly because I never really resonated with the term diva. But to your question, I was also just really excited I'm like, I don't care what they're called. It was cool to be there and to be a diva at that time, but my preference would have been to be a women's champion, but the prestige is the same to me for what it means to me. But yeah, I think it sounds much cooler as a women's championship.
Right. It was sort of like a double-edged sword. Like, they can call me whatever they want as long as I'm like top dog.
Yeah.
I remember one of your storylines too when you were the champ that I was really excited for before they, kind of cut it short was, and if you're familiar with Cody Rhodes, he's obviously like very prominent in the world of wrestling right now. I remember they had this storyline with you and him, and it was a funny one. It was like, or it was back when you had that whole gimmick with the mustaches, and then he had the mustache at the time. And I remember everybody loving where that storyline was going because you guys also had a lot of on-screen chemistry. Do you know like what that was supposed to lead to? Because my creative mind, I saw Dolph was with AJ at the time and he had Money in the Bank, and I thought for sure we were going to get a you and AJ, Dolph and Cody, kind of because they were coming up at the time. I thought that was going to be a thing, like a mixed tag type of thing.
Yeah, I think that may have been one of the ideas. So it's so funny to think about like how things get started. But I remember I didn't know when we first started NXT, WWE started all of us our first Twitter account. And so I just knew I had this social media. I was like on TV and, I'm going to start tweeting and learning in this. And so I didn't know what to put in a bio. And so I had, mustache enthusiast and it just became this whole thing, this whole gimmick for a while. And so I thought it was like the best. And I really loved working with Cody. He's like so charismatic. He's got a great attitude. He's a lot of fun. And so it was really cool to have that kind of start getting created. So I don't really know what the full idea was. I think that there was a couple of different ideas and they were just seeing where it was going. But I forget about certain storylines that kind of started and then never happened because there were so many of them, but I think that's the nature of it. Like someone will have a great idea, like whether it's a writer or a talent, and then it'll get approved in a production meeting, like let's try it, and then it just transforms into something else. That happens so many times, and it was just kind of the name of the game. So, but I would have really loved to have done a story with Cody. I do have a lot of respect for him, and of course his father, and I love Brandy, and that would have been really cool.
For sure. Has there been any chatter in recent years about possible Royal Rumble appearances for you, or?
I actually went to Royal Rumble last year, and I think it was in St. Louis, just to visit.
Yeah.
What did I go for? I went for something, but I haven't really. Besides the Mae Young, which I went back. I did the Mae Young Classic in 2018. It was the first time I did any kind of like actual wrestling besides. I had gotten back into the ring about 4 or 5 months before that, just because I was like at a really lost point in my life, and I got back in the ring to try to find something, some purpose, something to kind of like push myself through a kind of a vehicle for transformation. And I was feeling a lot better about myself doing that, and it was right after my divorce, and I was just really struggling to find something that felt good to do, and I had. Do you know who Canyon Seaman is?
Yeah.
Okay, Canyon. So he and I had become really tight. He I don't think he's with the company anymore, but he had come on with WWE during the time that I was there, and he had been brought on to help really develop like the talent process, recruiting process, and like just the whole preparation process and all that. And I feel like he had a massive hand in the performance center and everything that has been built since then. But he and I spent a lot of time together because he would talk to me a lot about the process of what it was like for me to come up from developmental onto television, because I kind of fell between the cracks. Like, I debuted on TV with just zero knowledge of wrestling and like no experience in the ring. And, WWE is like $1 billion company. So it would make sense to refine that process, so making sure that maybe doesn't happen again, or if it, not that I view my opportunity as bad, but so that people feel more confident in their abilities to perform on television as a performer, as a talent. And so we spent a lot of time together talking about things, and me sharing my experience, and just he's amazing. And so he actually saw that I had been getting back in the ring because I was sharing some of it on social media, and he reached out and he was like, hey, I put your name in the hat for Mae Young, do you want to do it? And I was like, yes. And so it was really cool to get to go back for that, because I felt like it was like this different redemption. It was like a different level. It was like a redemption for me. I felt like I had overcome a lot of things, and I was, choosing myself for a lot of things in my life for the first time ever. And, I had just like gotten my tattoo that I had wanted for so long. And I felt I was like really starting to step into myself. And it was just really nice to go back, and, I had 2 great matches. My second match, I got to wrestle Mia Yim, who I had so much love and respect for. And I actually really appreciated being able to wrestle her. She's such an artist in the ring. She's so talented. She's got such a great mentality, a great mind for the psychology, and just like an amazing person. And I had never really gotten to meet her before, other than she would support and buy my clothing brand, my Celeste Bonin, the clothing brand I started when I left wrestling. And so I always really loved and appreciated her for just supporting me. And I always just thought she was just a really unique and amazing wrestler. And so that we got to have a match, and it was an incredible match. She won. And when I rolled out of the ring, I remember feeling like, if this is the last time I ever wrestled for WWE, I will be happy, because I felt like I left it all out there. I felt so good about the match. I felt like I had redeemed myself. And then right after that moment, Triple H came out and signed her. So she got signed from that. And it was like this unbelievable moment. And then we had Renee Young, Beth Phoenix, and Michael Cole on commentary. And that was also a really cool moment, because Beth, she took me under her wing in so many moments and really looked out for me. And Renee, her and I had always connected, and I really had a lot of like respect for her. And then Michael Cole, it was cool because he was calling the match too. And I remember having like not that great of a relationship with him, because when all of us girls, all of us rookies were on NXT, he was the heel on the commentary table, and he was just like would really berate us, and it was just like, you know, we would watch our matches back, or we'd watch NXT back, and we'd be like, oh my god, like I can't believe he said that. Like it got to the point where it was like we felt like, you know, just some of the things that they were saying, and we, you know, it just felt, it didn't feel good. And so then to be able to like go sit in a room with them at the Mae Young years later and have this like dope conversation, it was really cool. And so I felt really really great about that, as kind of the last like hurrah with WWE as far as like getting in the ring. I don't actually remember the nature of your question, but it did lead us to that.
It was about the Royal Rumble. Do you think you would
Royal
ever
Rumble, yeah.
would you ever entertain it or think about it, or do you think that chapter's closed?
Oh, okay. This is why I even started talking about the Mae Young. When I did that, I was like, oh, I could, you know, I'm open to doing some more things. Yeah, but I was like, you know, with that match, it felt so good. I was like, if this is the last match I ever wrestle, I'll feel good about it, because I didn't feel good about how I left. I felt like there was just like so many like open and ended things, you know. And so that really like checked a box for me, and felt good in my heart. And then they actually offered me a contract after the Mae Young, but it didn't align. It didn't feel right. Like it just didn't align with where I was at in my life. And but I was at that point, I was open to doing something here or there, because I had kind of like gotten that revitalized that magic a little bit after Mae Young. So I was like open to it for a little bit, and that's why I did end up going to the
Rumble
Royal Rumble last year. Yeah, just because I was kind of open to the idea. But so you know, I'll never like fully. I say this, like I'll never fully close the chapter on it. Like, you know, I still do appearances and signings and stuff. But as far as like anything in ring, I don't. It would have to be like, incredibly aligned. Just because, you know, I love what I do now, and I know that life is such a different life than the way that I live my life now. So, you know, never say never, but it's not something that I'm like actively trying to bring into my awareness, my situation.
Right. You're doing so good now that it's almost like trying to like let something into that bubble might, you know, potentially jeopardize that.
That's a cool way of saying it. And I feel like too, I've let so many parts of myself, you know, either I'll sacrifice or say, oh, maybe I'll try this again at the risk of jeopardizing something, just because I'm like, what if, you know, what if because for a long time, I had that feeling of like, I wish I had accomplished more in my career, and there were so many more things I could do. So it's such a big platform to be able to share my message. And when I look at it like that, I'm like, wow, there is so much potential and so much possibility when you get aligned with like a huge company like WWE. So, you know, there was actually a time too where my husband and I were talking to, I don't even know how to say it. Some of the people, some of the people in the back, some of the people that are responsible for kind of the health and well-being of the talent, just the overall morale. And we were talking about working with them to kind of develop some kind of system or program for when the talent was not feeling good, not feeling confident in themselves, not feeling like they were being treated fairly, or just, you know, not in a good headspace. And it ended up not really working out, or it just didn't end up working out. And then that whole thing with Vince happened recently, or late last year or whatever. That was really interesting. So I was like, man, this is a lot. But I really think that there is a place for some kind of massive shift in the culture of how talent and the office show up for each other, and what that feels like on a regular basis for everyone. The writers, there's such a high turnover rate, and I do get it because it's like the circus, but the amount of stress that everybody is under is so insane to me. And unless there was like some really big change from within, I don't know if it's something that I would be able to sustain or be around for a long period of time. Just because now at this point in my life, I feel that I really am able to select the types of environments that I want to be in and what feels good to me.
Yeah, I've recently actually, from talking to some talent from other forms of entertainment and TV, I hear them talk about how there should be some type of transitional period after getting off of set or like of filming a show because of how much of a culture shock it is to like be in front of, producers and cameras 24/7 to then be thrust back into your normal life like that quick.
Yeah.
Like there's a culture shock element to that. And I guess the same could be said for wrestling as well, to a certain extent, except like there's obviously a way more physical toll that you're being taken on with wrestling as opposed to just normal filming of TV. So, but still kind of
Yeah.
same thing.
I've come into contact with a lot of people that were like professional athletes or like really high level athletes, or someone that was like part of a really rigorous filming schedule, whether it was TV or movies or something. And I think for anyone, it's kind of the same process of when you step away from that, you're like, who am I? And what is my purpose? What am I capable of? What do I want to do? Because I feel like when you step away from that, you realize how much of your life and that life force and all of your energy you give to it. So it's kind of this moment where you're like, unless you have the tools and you have the ability and the mental fortitude to be able to sit down and really assess what you want for your life and where you're at, unless you do that, I feel like it's so difficult to really have any direction or understand just who you are and what you want to do with your life, because it is such a massive change. Such a massive change of just the way that you live your life, from the time you start your day to how you end your day, it's just different. It's so different. I struggled a lot with that. I've met, different, ex football player and ex NFL players, or, my husband, he played at Ohio State. He was a very high level athlete for football. And so it's just, when you put all of yourself into something, you put all of your energy towards something, and all of a sudden it's no longer there, or you're not a part of it anymore. You just struggle with purpose. You struggle with where to find that feeling of satiation or purpose in your life. And it really does leave, to me, it doesn't leave a void. It's like you've always had that void. Like, so for me, I always had that void, and then I would try to fill it with fitness, and then it was wrestling. And then when I was done wrestling, it was time for me to start to figure out, what was it that I was searching for that I feel like I didn't get, and how can I give that to myself? So unless you have the awareness and the ability to do that assessment on yourself when you leave like a really big time career, or whatever it is, it's going to be really difficult. And I think it's going to be difficult no matter what, but as long as you do realize that there's like a big calibration process to calibrate yourself back into, or not even back into, just into a different life, into a different way of living, into a different way of being, it's such a transition.
But thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and gracing my shows with your presence. I had such a fun time speaking with you about some highlights from your career, and then kind of what you were dealing with after the fact and what you're up to now. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me. You're an excellent host, and I really enjoyed my time here. So thank you so much for having me on.
Great. Have a nice rest of your day.
You too.